Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. That's what we're saying. That's the story we're going to stick with. And it is our last day away from the microphone, unless, I don't know, things go horribly wrong or, I don't know, everything falls apart. I drop something into the ocean, perhaps on my way back, or I'm just too damn exhausted. But that's the promise I'm going to make, and I think the promise we can stick with. June 18th will be our last day away from the microphone. Still, nonetheless, a brand new show ready for you today. Hopefully, we return live tomorrow with Greg in tow as well. He'll have plenty to say after a week away from the microphone as well. Here's what we got on tap for you today. A roundup of the GOP Rogues Gallery. A few more people to add to it, but starting with Ed Martin, who we've been threatening to go back and round up all the bad news about him for a long time. He got bounced out of the position they were hoping to install him in as U.S. Attorney for D.C. Instead has landed as the pardon attorney, which requires no Senate confirmation. And today we'll compile most of the reasons that we can come up with why he never should have been under Senate consideration in the first place and how bad it is that he's landed as the pardon attorney. Plus a few other random GOP no-good nicks that we picked up on along the way. Some of them returning to the Trump fold after a stint in the first administration. And then, generally speaking, an attempt to round it all up, not just the no-good nicks, but all the rotten things that Trump himself has been up to. The New York Times takes a stab at compiling all the wrongdoing that it can in the generalized culture of corruption. So let's kick it off right away and get right into what I've recorded for you. All right, it's time for us to address Ed Martin. We originally had a focus on him when he was interim, not acting, U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. I need to find John Lovitz and get him to say interim. And I'm not certain I'm ever going to be able to make that happen. But at any rate, and then we were all spared the possibility of his becoming permanent U.S. or, at least during the balance of the term, U.S. Attorney for D.C. as his nomination was torpedoed. And we began to learn some of the reasons why his nomination was torpedoed by Republicans who just couldn't stomach the idea of his taking this job. But then they found a job that they should have given him a long time ago. I mean, they should not have given this job to him, obviously, but he shouldn't get any job. But they needed to recognize from the beginning that they were never going to get this guy past the Senate. And they should have just, for their own sake, not mine, but theirs, started off with him in a position that didn't require Senate confirmation. And so they have now installed him in maybe one of the most damaging positions possible as pardon attorney. And we've talked about that a lot and read a couple of articles about the people he's considering for pardons. And it's horrific, of course, but all the background information that I was thinking of reading onto the record when he was still up for U.S. Attorney, we put off after the nomination was torpedoed. And then when we found out he was his pardon attorney, we said, okay, well, we saved the information. And it's now time to read that into the record because we're stuck with him. And he's a pardon attorney. And this will give you some idea if for any reason at this point you're still confused about why he's doing things like entertaining the idea that Trump should say pardon to people who are on trial for plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, or whatever. Any number of pardons that he's considering. This will help explain some of that. I'm going to read them out of chronological order, but like I said, they've been sitting around for some time. The first one here is an April 3rd NBC News article by Ryan J. Riley, as he would have it in the byline. Ex-prosecutors raise alarm over Trump loyalist tapped for key U.S. attorney post. So he was still up for it at this point, but this is, again, one of the background pieces about why various factions were so adamantly opposed to him, and it would apply to his service as pardon attorney as well, I am sure. Ed Martin's actions as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, in the interim position he served in, have come under increasing scrutiny, and Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee are calling for a hearing. What would they have heard at such a hearing? Ryan tells us back on April 3rd, former federal prosecutors and outside organizations raised alarms this week over the administration, or rather the nomination of Ed Martin, the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, to take over as the top federal prosecutor in Washington on a permanent basis. Martin, who backed Donald Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen and advocated for the defendants in the January 6th Capitol riot cases, had no prosecutorial experience before Trump made him interim U.S. Attorney on Inauguration Day. He was very sure about that, went right to it. And he has taken a number of highly unusual and political actions since he took over the position on a temporary basis. On Wednesday, and again, we're talking early April, Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee called for a hearing on Martin's nomination, which would break from standard practice for nominees for U.S. Attorney positions. Senator Adam Schiff of California announced this week that he would place a hold on Martin's nomination, which would delay or could delay a vote on that nomination. In a letter sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee this week, April, again, and obtained by NBC News, more than 100 former assistant U.S. attorneys who worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia signed a statement of conscience and principle laying out why they see Martin as unfit. We are determined that the values and norms that were birthed during the tenure of John Thompson Mason and his successors, a commitment to the rule of law, the absence of partisanship in the pursuit of justice, the presence of civility, decency, and fairness, continue unabated now and hereafter. The statement reads, what a statement, calling Martin unworthy of the position. I don't know if you are familiar, I am not, with John Thompson Mason, but it's such flighty rhetoric. I'm wondering if he was the first U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. I'm guessing. John Thompson Mason, Wikipedia tells me, was an American lawyer and Attorney General of Maryland in 1806. Let's see. Any indication that he was U.S. Attorney? Here we are. Admitted to the Maryland bar. He attained high rank, but twice declined the office of U.S. Attorney General, offered to him by both Presidents Jefferson and Madison. He then served as Attorney General of Maryland in 1806. One of 6 judges appointed to a newly restructured Court of Appeals by Governor Robert Bowie in 1806 declined that appointment, ran for one of Maryland's seats in the U.S. Senate, but lost. He was holding out for that, and it didn't work out. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what specifically it was that made him the role model, but what can I tell you? I'm sure it was terrific. I don't know. Unless it's another one. I mean, I don't think so. Let's see. There was a John Thompson Mason, who was also an American lawyer, U.S. Marshal and Secretary of Michigan Territory. Also, the first one's son, who became a congressman from Maryland. I assume it was, well, I don't know, it was maybe one of those. Let's take a look. I know I'm being distracted by this, but this is the sort of thing I want to learn some things along the way, just like you. Oh, look at this. I know this person's estate anyway. John Thompson Mason, spelled the same way, American lawyer and U.S. Marshal, Secretary of Michigan Territory, as we mentioned, in the 1830s, land agent and important figure in the Texas Revolution as well. Born 1787 at Raspberry Plain near Leesburg in Loudoun County, Virginia. Raspberry Falls, now a high-end golf course out there. I wonder if that was his estate. Anyway, I don't know who they're patterning themselves after, but in any case, he sounds like a wonderful guy. It was just, well, I don't know. It was a little much for me in terms of the flighty rhetoric, but please, let's get back to the better points, or the more relatable points of the letter and the story. Okay, so let's see. He certainly had some great principles, right? Civility, decency, fairness. We love that. Daniel Toomey, a former federal prosecutor who served in the office from 1968 to 1971, told NBC News the letter grew out of a regular Zoom call that started around 4 years ago, involving alumni of the Washington Federal Prosecutor's Office, many of whom worked there in the late 1960s and early 1970s. So I was wondering about that, like 100 former assistant U.S. attorneys. Wow, that's a huge office. Well, but this goes all the way back to the 60s. When we started to learn about Ed Martin, we, to a man and irrespective of our politics, were appalled, Toomey told NBC News. We have never, ever seen anything like this in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Toomey said that the list of signers leans toward those who have retired from practicing law, and that they believe the list would be in the hundreds, if not for those still in private practice who may be worried about retaliation by the Trump administration. I can't tell you the number of people who would call, and friends of mine would call, who said, I fully agree with you, but I can't sign this, Toomey said. Toomey said some of the signers of the letter plan to meet with Senate staffers next week to express their concerns. The entirety of the letter is printed here. It's a one-pager, but then it has got like a three-page appendix of some kind, and then the 2 pages of signatories here. The letter ticks through a number of Martin's actions in office, including the termination of some federal prosecutors who worked on January 6th cases, his own social media posts about active investigations, and the unusual letters he has sent to Democratic members of Congress suggesting he's investigating their speech. In his tryout phase, he has butchered the position, effectively destroying it as a vehicle by which to pursue justice and turning it into a political arm of the current administration, reads the statement from the former assistant U.S. attorneys. Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, said Thursday that Trump had nominated Ed Martin precisely because he's confident Mr. Martin will place his blind and unlimited loyalty to Trump above his duty to enforce the law impartially. Martin did not respond to a message seeking comment. Martin recently submitted documents to the Senate Judiciary Committee in connection with his nomination, which indicate he never litigated a trial and show that most of the legal experience he identifies as his most significant had to do with January 6th, including representing 3 defendants. Among his 10 most significant litigated matters, according to the documents he submitted, which were obtained by NBC News, were 4 matters he had been involved with as interim U.S. attorney. So, I mean, that's only been the past, 4 months. What have you done with the rest of your life? No answer on that. Those included, by the way, making sure cases that were affected by Trump's pardons, including those of January 6th participants and anti-abortion rights demonstrators, were disposed of in accordance with President Donald J. Trump's decision to exercise his powers under Article 2 of the United States Constitution. So, I mean, it's really not a particularly significant action on his part. So he puffed it up by throwing in there President of the United States, Article 2, United States Constitution. I mean, again, this question is the 10 most significant litigated matters in your career. And what did we say? Some number of them were, well, I made sure that pardons that he signed were on paper and handed into the right office and stuff. But, I was honored to have served America that way. Martin has an extensive digital footprint, but the Senate questionnaire blows past some of the more noteworthy moments of his career. His speech at the U.S. Capitol on January 5th, very significant, January 5th, 2021, in which he encouraged, quote, die-hard true Americans, unquote, to fight until their, quote, last breath, to, quote, stop the steal, is not listed. His list of publications also does not include Can't Trump This Covfefe, Top Trump Tweets. It's a coloring book. What a great publication. That nods to a typo Trump made on social media in 2017. You all remember that one. And episodes of Martin's old podcasts, which he does list on the form, now show up as, quote, temporarily unavailable on iTunes. Okay, so that's the briefest of rundowns of his fairly serious problems that should, by rights, stand in the way, should and did stand in the way of his confirmation to the position. And now, of course, that nomination is dead and he's installed as pardon attorney. But let's read some of the other background information that should have kept him out of government entirely, but I guess did not. First, a couple of long reads, two left here. Mother Jones, Dan Friedman and Amanda Moore, published on March 24th. I guess, well, his nomination was still pending, right? If we're reading correctly that in early April it was still pending. Ed Martin is trampling the rule of law, and he won't shut up about it. Wow. Trump's loyal prosecutor is weaponizing the DOJ one typo at a time. What's going on? When Elon Musk ordered a government-wide email blast directing federal employees to list their recent accomplishments, most senior officials paused to consider their options. In the Justice Department, U.S. attorneys around the country discussed the matter over an email list they share, with many deciding to seek more guidance before instructing career prosecutors on how to respond. One questioned whether the email was even real. But Ed Martin, an acolyte of President Donald Trump, named interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, charged ahead. It's legit. And we've already replied, he told his fellow U.S. attorneys. Great leadership. I don't know whether he meant himself or what. Just 33 minutes after the Office of Personnel Management directive hit inboxes, Martin urged lawyers under him to comply, though he suggested they respond carefully. DOGEy and Elon are doing great work, Martin wrote in one of his frequent communiques to hundreds of assistant U.S. attorneys and support staff. I guess they do have hundreds. We are happy to participate. For Martin, right, I don't know whether that's, now that I'm looking at it, is that hundreds of assistant U.S. attorneys there in the D.C. office, or just hundreds of U.S. attorneys across the country, assistant U.S. attorneys on the email list? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. For Martin, a right-wing activist and serial political candidate who has enthusiastically defended January 6th rioters, this was just one more typographically challenged missive in a campaign to turn a powerful legal office into a partisan weapon. Since taking on the gig in January, he's compensated for his lack of prosecutorial experience by loudly proclaiming his desire to help Trump and Musk use the DOJ to punish their foes. He's never been in the job, so he doesn't really quite understand why it's inappropriate, but I've never been in that job, and I understand why it's inappropriate. I've read something, so all right. Trump quickly returned the favor, nominating him to hold the post indefinitely. Martin, who did not respond to questions from Mother Jones, has announced investigations into his own staff for their role in January 6th cases and has volunteered to support Attorney General Pam Bondi's Orwellian Weaponization Working Group, which purports to take aim at abuses of the justice system during the Biden administration. Martin has threatened former special counsel Jack Smith and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and has used X to indicate plans to investigate administration critics. He's even tried to leverage a dubious criminal probe to seize climate grant money awarded by the Biden administration. You remember that one? As he posts his way to prominence, Martin has bombarded his staff with chatty emails recounting his daily activities, then repeatedly berated them after those emails leaked. In a new administration defined by a mixture of malevolence and ineptitude, Martin has emerged as an avatar, a typo-spewing henchman of the moment, eager to help Trump transform the Justice Department into a political tool and unable to shut up about it. That might be the best part. Next section here is Eagle Ed. I have seen him referred to that way. What's going on? Right. Oh, wasn't it his association with the Eagle Forum? Right. I remember that one. Martin, whom associates call outwardly affable, presents as a guy pleased and a bit surprised by his elevation. He has a little bit of buffoonery and a Mr. Smith comes to Washington vibe, said one person who has worked in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. His emails and other communications tend to read like daily journal entries. Life is very different for me and my family these days, Martin wrote in a February 4th Substack post. I am up earlier and into the office in downtown D.C., home late, pretty tired by then. Tell us about your ham sandwiches, man. There is so much to tell you, he added. One aspect, my new office is large. Thanks. That's insightful. If Martin is pinching himself at his new position, he has reason. While U.S. attorneys are often experienced prosecutors or rising political prospects, Martin, at age 54, is more of a journeyman. He spent much of the past 2 decades as a conservative activist in Missouri, running a series of political organizations, a sort of far-right change agent who leaves behind litigation and enemies. As chief of staff for Missouri Governor Matt Blunt in 2007, oh boy, Martin fired a state attorney, Scott Eckersley, who had warned against deleting emails that state law required be retained. Oh, you're correct? Well, you're fired then. In a lawsuit, Eckersley alleged that Martin and other officials had falsely accused him of, quote, accessing group sex websites on his state computer, and had defamed him to the media, largely by saying that, I assume. The state attorney general's office ultimately agreed to pay Eckersley $500,000 in settlements on the matter. Whoops. Martin ran for Congress in 2010. He started and ended Senate and House campaigns, both in 2012, before committing to the state attorney general race that year. None of his campaigns were successful. After a stint running Missouri's GOP, and heading several conservative nonprofits, Martin landed in 2015 as president of the Eagle Forum, an organization founded by conservative hero Phyllis Schlafly, then 90 years old. You remember the first time around when we mentioned this, I mistakenly thought there was some sort of basing of that organization here in Loudoun County because we had a local activist who was executive director somehow of the Eagle Forum. But I guess the Eagle Forum was just one of the early adopters of remote work, the remote work model, which they now hate. So anyway, there you go. Within a year, Martin had been fired by the group's board and accused by Schlafly's daughter, Anne Schlafly Corey, C-O-R-I is her last name now, of manipulating the aging icon to commandeer her organization's and legacy. In 2016, Corey and other group members sued Martin for alleged acts that included impersonating Schlafly on Facebook posts and other correspondence. During Martin's brief tenure, the Eagle Forum has experienced unprecedented chaos. Oh no, not that. The plaintiffs asserted in their complaint. Martin denied those claims. In March of 2016, with Martin at her side, Schlafly endorsed Trump. She died on September 5th, 2016. I guess not long thereafter. Her name appeared posthumously alongside Martin's as an author of the book, The Conservative Case for Trump, published the next day, tastefully enough. A year later, Roy Moore, the former Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice, then running for Senate, claimed Schlafly among his endorsers. Moore's webpage, Roll Call reported, said, Phyllis Schlafly, late president, Eagle Forum, inference of Ed Martin. I remember reading about that one too. That's no basis on which to claim an endorsement, but hey, that's not that they have any integrity or anything. Martin by then had launched a new group, which he called Phyllis Schlafly's American Eagles. Sure. And he retained control of another Schlafly-founded nonprofit, the Eagle Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund. Tax filings by the latter group show Martin's salary as president, which fluctuated, peaked at just over $204,000 in 2020. He'd received more than $1.4 million in total from the group as of 2023. He still uses the X handle Eagle Ed Martin. Martin netted more than $322,000 from yet another former Schlafly nonprofit, America's Future, while serving as its president beginning in 2016. In 2021, Martin's final year leading that group, he received more than $83,000 for the job, which, according to tax filings, took him 8 hours per week. Ooh, I'd like to have that job. That year, the group appointed Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor and a prominent far-right conspiracy theorist, as its board chair. America's Future also hired Flynn's brother, Joe. It's the second brother of his that I've learned about, and his sister Mary to top jobs. Within a few years of Martin's departure, America's Future was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to the members of the Flynn family. Asked about this, Joe Flynn, a sometime spokesperson for the family, texted, F off, with the full word, F off, quote me. Okay, I do feel like we might have heard about that one before. Next up, Stop the Steal. Is it possible we began reading this article at one point in the distant past and then had to abandon the work? midway when we ran out of time entirely. But I'm glad to return to it now. We'll put together one whole big Ed Martin special. Stop the Steal is the next section. Martin moved to Virginia in 2017 and spent much of the first Trump administration as a far-right pundit. He lost a gig as a CNN contributor after complaining about appearing on the network alongside, quote, black racists. Boy, he's really going for it. He ran a feeble 2019 campaign for the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax County, Virginia. He also designed a coloring book based on Trump's 2017 Kovfefe typo tweet. Why that should be the inspiration for it, I have no idea. In it, aspiring artists can color and outline images of Kanye West and Candace Owens under a West tweet boasting that he had a signed MAGA hat. Or they can complete a connect the dots puzzle of a MAGA hat on a page advertising a free downloadable song sharing a hashtag Kovfefe is love message. Terrific. That is so nice. Here is a tweet with an embedded photo of the cover of the coloring book. What a very serious pursuit. Martin gained focus, that's nice, following the 2020 election, organizing pro-Trump protests alongside Ali Alexander, the Stop the Steal activist who claimed he, quote, came up with the idea to pressure Congress on January 6th not to certify Biden's victory. Martin was kind of like a mentor, Alexander said in a December 2021 deposition conducted by the House January 6th committee. According to Alexander, the two men prayed together every morning. In depositions, other January 6th rally organizers expressed various concerns about Alexander, who raised hundreds of thousands of dollars without setting up a nonprofit group or accounting for the funds. But Martin offered his own nonprofit as a place for Alexander to park cash. Alexander told the committee, seems like a good idea. Martin's group acted as a sponsor for collecting Stop the Steal funds for the rally. Alexander testified. Alexander did not respond to inquiries from Mother Jones. And in case you were ever approached by it, and Ed Martin says, you can park all your money in my nonprofit's bank accounts. No problem. You'll totally get it all back. Don't believe him. In late 2020, Martin was in regular contact with Vincent Haley, a White House aide, according to previously unreported text messages released by the January 6th committee. Shortly after the election, Martin urged Haley to, quote, push a pardon for Mike Flynn, who had pleaded guilty in 2017 to lying to the FBI, but was never imprisoned. The Trump DOJ already had dropped the case against Flynn, but Martin suggested that the former general will be more willing to join Stop the Steal rallies once pardoned. He'd come to D.C. for the rally/march. Martin texted Haley on November 10th. We need that guy loosed. I have recommended it, Haley responded. It's not clear whether Martin's pressure had any impact, and Haley didn't respond to Mother Jones' questions, but Trump pardoned Flynn on November 26th, 2020. Flynn then spoke at D.C. rallies on December 12th and January 5th. Okay. Martin also spoke at those rallies, and he was outside the Capitol on January 6th as rioters attacked police. But Martin, who was not charged with the crime, saw no evil. Rowdy crowd, but nothing out of hand, he tweeted at 2:53 p.m. that day. Ignore the fake news. In a video he posted the next day, Martin repeated false claims that the attack had been orchestrated by left-wing infiltrators. Now we know that it was Antifa, he said. It was plants. Good thing to make him a prosecutor. Martin's efforts drew a subpoena from the January 6th committee. He ignored it, as most, and reminder that ignoring the subpoena normally gets you a contempt of Congress citation if they go all the way with it. And the contempt of Congress citations are prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia most regularly, most ordinarily, which was the job that he was up for at the time and held in an interim capacity. I guess that's maybe the person who would be most sure of themselves in attempting or deciding to ignore a congressional subpoena. Will I prosecute myself? No, I won't. Okay, I guess I can go to sleep at night now. He went on to become a vocal advocate for attackers facing legal charges and represented several people charged with taking part in the riot. Martin was no ordinary defense attorney. He was barely a defense attorney at all, I would suggest. He suggested that the defendants should receive reparations, and he's still doing that now, and pushed a bizarre and unsubstantiated conspiracy theory that January 6th was staged by Mr. Coffee, a supposedly unidentified man seen drinking coffee near the gallows display constructed outside the Capitol that day. Martin pursued this theory vigorously, posting, quote, missing person flyers featuring grainy images of the man around Washington. On the right-wing podcast circuit, he called for, quote, accountability for those who had investigated January 6th. One of the reasons I think that we should fear for this election, he said last summer, is because there's hundreds of Democrats and some Republicans, Liz Cheney, that they know they're going to jail. Next section, a great failure of our office. Martin began working as U.S. Attorney on Inauguration Day, the day Trump granted clemency to 1,600 January 6th defendants. The president's vaguely worded declaration largely left implementation to the DOGEy, and Martin took on that task with alacrity. When a judge barred Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, whose 18-year sentence Trump had commuted, from entering D.C., Martin intervened, successfully arguing that the order was improper. Rhodes, who has since shown up on Capitol Hill, later told reporters that the judge, quote, got slapped down by Ed Martin. As an interim U.S. attorney, Martin can serve a maximum of 120 days unless the Senate confirms him to fill the job permanently. He wasted no time in reshaping the office in his image, demoting key attorneys who'd worked on January 6th cases and initiating an internal investigation of prosecutors who charged defendants with violating a particularly harsh obstruction statute, 18 U.S. Code Section 1512, that the Supreme Court later ruled did not apply to most of the rioters. For Martin, the DOJ's use of that provision had long been an obsession. Who ordered the 1512? He asked on Charlie Kirk's podcast in 2023. If it was Garland or Lisa Monaco or Joe Biden or Hunter, that guy or gal needs to end up in jail. And remember, Lisa Monaco, former Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, in case you did not recall that. That's in brackets here. In a January 27th, 2025 email that began by lamenting the Washington Commanders' playoff loss the day before, Martin asked D.C. prosecutors to hand over material relevant to his probe into this matter, which he dubbed the 1512 Project. Get it? Obviously, the use of the statute was a great failure of our office, he wrote to his staff, and we need to get to the bottom of it. The next day, he reminded employees to cough up information about their own activities. Please be proactive. If you have nothing, tell the co-chairs. He wrote, failure to do so strikes me as insubordinate. Of course, you'll be out in a couple of days, but okay. News of this investigation was quickly reported. Wow, what a disappointment to have my email yesterday to you all, I guess, to find out that it was leaked almost immediately, Martin wrote in another email. Again, personally insulting and professionally unacceptable. I guess I have learned my lesson, but maybe not, because a few days later, Martin was again chastising his staff after Reuters reported that he had put his name on a January 21st DOJ filing requesting that a judge dismiss charges against one of Martin's personal January 6th clients, whom Trump had just pardoned. Martin, it emerged, had not withdrawn as the man's attorney, putting him on both sides of the case. An ethical breach that drew a bar complaint, right? So he's the prosecutor and the defense attorney. Didn't withdraw? Come on. In a February 5th filing, he told the judge that he had not actually represented that client since 2023 and then asked to withdraw from the case. I have said repeatedly over the past few days that we must protect our lawyers, staff, and all on our team from doxing, from attacks, and from any threats, he wrote in a February 5th email to his staff complaining about that leak. He urged them to join a training quote, to protect ourselves from unethical behavior. Oh, thank you. This admonishment came a few paragraphs after Martin's description of his visit to Frederick Douglass's house in D.C. It's a fascinating site, and I encourage you to visit. And a meeting with D.C. District Court Chief Judge James Boasberg and other judges. It was an off-the-record conversation, but I can say it was an extraordinary one. All right, a little mundane, but that's him. Next section, entitled No One is Above the Law. Martin has also made repeated public offers of DOJ assistance in combating the Trump administration's enemies. Shortly after Wired reported the names of engineers working for Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, prompting a flurry of social media attention and public complaints from the billionaire, Martin posted an image of a letter to Musk on X, and in it he typed, "Dear Elon," which he then crossed out and replaced with a handwritten Elon. And I think when we saw that one, we may have remarked on that. Yeah, usually it will say, "Dear Mr. Musk," and you'll cross that out and write the more personal Elon. Why you would cross out Elon and write Elon, he just never understood the crossing out protocols. I ask that you utilize me and my staff to assist in protecting the dodgy work and dodgy workers, Martin wrote. Any threats, confrontations, or other actions in any way that impact their work may break numerous laws. 5 hours later, Martin posted that his office already had found that, quote, certain individuals and or groups have committed acts that appear to violate the law in targeting dodgy employees. Martin released a new letter on February 7th, which he clarified had been, quote, sent only via X, exclusively on X. Looking to curry favor there, too. He again crossed out a typed Elon in favor of a handwritten Elon, and that's really super stupid. But okay. Thank you for the referral of individuals and networks who appear to be stealing government property and or threatening government employees, Martin wrote. If people are discovered to have broken the law or even acted simply unethically, we will investigate them and we will chase them to the end of the earth to hold them accountable. He added, misspelled and in bold, no one, Noone, just jamming it all together, is above the law. Noonie is above the law. Well, all right. Some people do make that mistake, and I've always hated that one myself, but okay. Martin has since routinely used his X account to publicly suggest that the Trump DOJ might take action in response to allegations lobbed on social media. Duly noted, he wrote in response to a request from the Homeland Security Department X account that he look into an unsubstantiated DOGEy claim that a, quote, Biden transition team member had rigged a contract. Okay, we are on it. As large protests against DOGEy began last month, Martin retweeted a post by Mike Cernovich, a commentator known for his role in boosting false conspiracy theories related to Pizzagate back in 2016. Cernovich was now suggesting that Trump fans take advantage of Martin's presence at the DOJ to, quote, attend far left-wing rallies, capture the reaction, and where appropriate, seek criminal prosecution. Martin in January personally wrote to Schumer, threatening legal action over a 2020 speech warning Supreme Court justices against curtailing abortion rights. You have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price, Schumer said at the time. The Democratic senator wasn't threatening actual violence, but he expressed regret for his statement the day after he made it, saying he meant there would be political consequences, and his chief of staff appears to have explained that in a response to Martin's query. But Martin, in a February email, asserted that Schumer had ignored him, calling the snub a personal disappointment and professionally unacceptable. That's nearly the same phrase Martin used to berate his staff for email leaks. He urged Schumer to, quote, complete this inquiry before any action is taken. I remind you, no one is above the law. That one he got into two separate words. That's good news. Days later, Martin forced the resignation of Denise Chung, a 24-year DOJ DOJ veteran, not 24 years old, but had in fact spent a lifetime at DOJ after she declined to launch a criminal probe and freeze assets of an environmental group awarded a contract by the Biden administration. I remember this. Martin then personally submitted a seizure warrant application himself, an extraordinary move for a U.S. attorney. A magistrate judge rejected the request, finding the application lacked sufficient evidence of a crime, the Washington Post reported. That's kind of, how law works. Ed, maybe you want to look into that. Okay. Embedded next here is a tweet from the U.S. Attorney DC's account on X with a quote from Ed Martin, listed here as United States Attorney, which he was not. As President Trump's lawyers, we are proud to fight to protect his leadership as our president, and we are vigilant in standing against entities like the AP, the Associated Press, that refuse to put America first by changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a reader context note attached. The DOJ is not the personal law firm of the president. The Attorney General represents the United States in legal matters generally and gives advice and opinions to the president and to the heads of executive departments of the government when so requested. But that overlooks the fact that Ed Martin, and thank God, is not the Attorney General or even acting or, yes, that's right, not acting Attorney General, not interim Attorney General, nothing to do with the Attorney General, U.S. Attorney. It's different, but okay. Still, they're not the president's lawyers. The same week, Martin helped defend the administration from a lawsuit filed by the Associated Press, that's what he's referring to, which had been barred from some of the White House events over the news organization's refusal to adopt Gulf of America in its style guide. As President Trump's lawyers, we are proud to fight to protect his leadership as our president, right? He declared in a graphic that was posted. It wasn't just typed in, by the U.S. Attorney's Office account. While a court hearing in the case was taking place, the AP, he complained, was refusing to put America first. And remember, again, the demand is that the AP change its own style guide. That's what they were worried about. On February 17th, Trump officially nominated Martin for the permanent U.S. Attorney job. His conduct so far could complicate his Senate confirmation, and it did. Even Senator Josh Hawley, Martin's fellow Missouri election denier, has declined to commit to backing him, but the same antics that leave some Republican lawmakers wary of Martin appear to make him exactly who the president wants. That's rather astonishing, but true. And herein is next embedded a tweet, which I wonder whether they're just going to cover in the narrative of the story later on, because, that's what they did to me last time, but it doesn't look like it. This is from Adam Steinbaugh, whose name I don't recognize, but the U.S. Attorney in D.C., he says, is investigating Georgetown Law School. Is that where he's from? Demanding that, quote, if DEI is found in your courses or teaching in any way, all one word, sick, any way, the law school should, quote, move swiftly to remove it. That Ed Martin was one of the most enthusiastic in pursuing the idea that the Department of Justice should be pressuring outside and private organizations to change the way they do business, internal business practices, essentially, dictated to them by the Department of Justice. Federal prosecutors don't control classrooms, Adams says, and then attaching the letter to William Traynor, Dean of Georgetown Law, from Ed Martin, basically telling him the same thing. Meanwhile, Martin is still firing off those communiques. A few days after ousting Chung, he sent his staff pictures from a meeting with Joe DeGeneva, a pro-Trump former U.S. attorney for D.C. who once claimed Fox News, quote, is compromised when it comes to George Soros. Oh, I see. These weeks have been a whirlwind, Martin commented, meeting so many new people. In a March 15th Substack post, Martin again groused about his emails leaking. Personally insulting and professionally unacceptable, he wrote. Again, believe it or not, but regularly happening. He added that he is actively and carefully, parentheses, quietly, investigating. And when I find the leaks, you will find the accountability. The same day, Martin renewed his search for Mr. Coffee, posting a video he'd previously made suggesting the real architects of January 6th were connected to the FBI. Worth a look, no? The interim U.S. attorney wrote. Who lied to us? And then all of a sudden, he just wasn't there anymore. But there's another longish piece, this time from ProPublica, who published in late April, the 24th. Byline here goes to Jeremy Kohler and Andy Kroll, who wrote the piece entitled The Untold Story. It's getting told now, of course. The Untold Story of How Ed Martin Ghost Wrote Online Attacks Against a Judge and Still Became a Top Trump Prosecutor. You know, it's just not great. Let's see what they've got on tap here for this one. The attacks on Judge John Barberis, Barberis, in the fall of 2016, that's a ways back, appeared on his personal Facebook page. They impugned his ethics, criticized a recent ruling, and branded him as a politician with the lowest rating for a judge in Illinois. Is that even a thing? I don't know. Barberis, a state court judge in an Illinois county across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, that explains it, was presiding over a nasty legal battle for control of the Eagle Forum, the vaunted grassroots group founded by Phyllis Schlafly, matriarch of the anti-feminist movement. The case pitted Schlafly's youngest daughter against 3 of her sons, almost like a Midwest version of the HBO program Succession, but without the obscenities. Are you sure? At the heart of the dispute, and the lead defendant in the case, was Ed Martin, a lawyer by training anyway, and a political operative by trade. In Missouri, where he was based, Martin was widely known as an irrepressible gadfly who trafficked in incendiary claims and trailed controversy wherever he went. Today, he's the interim U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. Of course, actually, today he is not. He's now the pardon attorney for the president. Isn't that something? And one of the most prominent members of the Trump Justice Department. Wow. In early 2015, Schlafly had selected Martin to succeed her as head of the Eagle Forum, a crowning moment in Martin's career. Yet, after just a year in charge, the group's board fired Martin, kind of reminiscent here of Pete Hegseth and his nonprofit career, too, isn't it? Schlafly's youngest daughter, Anne Schlafly Corey, and a majority of the Eagle Forum board filed a lawsuit to bar Martin from any association with the organization. After Barberis dealt Martin a major setback in the case in October of 2016, the attacks began. The Facebook user who posted them, Priscilla Gray, allegedly, had worked in several roles for Schlafly, but was not a party to the case, and her comments read like those of an aggrieved outsider. Almost 2 years later, the truth emerged as Corey's lawyers gathered evidence for her lawsuit. Behind the posts about the judge was none other than Martin. ProPublica obtained previously unreported documents filed in the case that show Martin had bought a laptop for Gray and that she subsequently offered to, quote, happily write something to attack this judge. And when she did, Martin ghost wrote more posts for her to use and coached her on how to make her comments look more, quote, organic. And there's a screen grab of the memo here. Do they discuss, what sorts of things does he tell her? It comes in email. Go slow and steady, not too much of a flood, make it organic. Email his comments to others and say, is this right? Direct message him and play sweet/dumb. I am not a lawyer, but how can this happen? And John and Roger and others are grieving their mother's death. Can't this wait? Oh, this, I guess, John and Roger and others being Schlafly's sons. On October 1st, 2016, this is all in October of 2016, Priscilla Gray answered it. Ed Martin, I guess they knock her things out of there. But Ed also writes, turn up the heat with others on his page. Call what he did unfair and rigged over and over. He's doing it like Hillary does. And later, go back on his page and write, quote, your ruling puts Ann Corey and her co-plaintiffs in charge of the entity they sued, Eagle Forum. How can the Ann Corey and the plaintiffs now be telling the lawyers for defendant Eagle Forum how to defend themselves? That is not justice, but a rigged system. So you gave them Eagle Forum by rigging it so Ann Corey is lawyer for both sides. Not that, right? Shame on you in this broken legal system. Little did we know that later on, that's exactly how he would handle his January 6th cases. Isn't that something? What a surprise. Every Republican accusation is a confession. I keep telling you. Now, back to the narrative here. That is not justice, but a rigged system, he urged her to write. Shame on you in this broken legal system. Call what he did unfair and rigged over and over, Martin continued. Martin even urged Gray to message the public, or rather, message the judge privately. Go slow and steady, make it organic, etc. Gray appeared to take Martin's advice, private messaging him with that sweet line she wrote. It was not clear from the court record what, if anything, she wrote at that juncture. Legal experts told ProPublica that Martin's conduct in the Eagle Forum case was a clear violation of ethical norms and professional rules. Martin's behavior, they said, was especially egregious because he was both a defendant in the case and a licensed attorney. But, of course, that didn't stop him, nor did it... it actually inspired him later on to do the same thing as U.S. Attorney for D.C., for God's sake. Martin appeared to be deliberately interfering with a judicial proceeding with the intent to undermine the integrity of the outcome, said Scott Cummings, a professor of legal ethics at UCLA School of Law. That's not okay. Martin did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Martin's legal and political career is dotted with questions about his professional and ethical conduct, but for all his years in the spotlight, some of the most serious concerns about his conduct have remained in the shadows, buried in court filings, overlooked by the press, or never reported at all. His actions have led to more than $600,000 in legal settlements or judgments against Martin or his employers in a handful of cases. In the Eagle Forum lawsuit, another judge found him in civil contempt, citing his willful disregard of a court order, and a jury found him liable for defamation and false light against Corey. So really all the things that he's accusing others of doing, he's in fact doing himself. Not only that, representing both sides somehow in a case, but the idea of expressing that incredulity through Priscilla Gray. How can you put someone who's actually suing this thing in charge of it? And that's called, of course, the entirety of the Trump administration. Corey also tried to have Martin charged with criminal contempt for his role in orchestrating the posts about Barbarous, but a judge declined to take up the request and said she could take the case to the county prosecutor. Corey said her attorney met with a detective. Martin was never charged, so of course he wasn't going to take contempt citations seriously later on either. Nonetheless, the emails unearthed by ProPublica were evidence that he had violated Missouri rules for lawyers, according to Kathleen Clark, a legal ethics expert and law professor at Washington University in St. Louis. She said lawyers are prohibited from trying to contact the judge outside of court in a case that they're involved in, and they are barred from using a proxy to do something they are barred from doing themselves. Such a track record might have derailed another lawyer's career, not so for Martin. As a presidential candidate, Donald Trump vowed to use the Justice Department to reward his allies and seek retribution against his perceived enemies. Since taking office, Trump and his appointees have made good on those pledges, pardoning January 6th rioters while targeting Democratic politicians, media critics, and private law firms. As one of the first personnel picks, the Trump administration chose Martin to be interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, one of the premier jobs for a federal prosecutor. A wide array of former prosecutors, legal observers, and others have raised questions about his qualifications for an office known for handling high-profile cases. Martin has no experience as a prosecutor. He has never taken a case to trial, according to his own public disclosures. As the acting leader of the largest U.S. Attorney's office in the country, although it was really interim, he directs the work of hundreds of lawyers, again, the numbers, who appear in court on a vast array of subjects, including legal disputes arising out of Congress, national security matters, public corruption, and civil rights, as well as homicides, drug trafficking, and many other local crimes. Over the last 4 years, the office prosecuted more than 1,500 people as part of the massive investigation into the violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. While Trump has pardoned the January 6th defendants, Martin has taken action against the prosecutors who brought those cases. In just 3 months, he has overseen the dismissal of outstanding January 6th related cases, fired more than a dozen prosecutors, and opened an investigation into charging decisions made in those riot cases. Martin has also investigated Democratic lawmakers and members of the Biden family, forced out the chief of the criminal division after she refused to initiate an investigation desired by Trump appointees, citing a lack of evidence, according to her resignation letter, threatened Georgetown University's law school over its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and vowed to investigate threats against a Department of Government Efficiency employees or chase people in the federal government discovered to have broken the law or even acted simply unethically. Martin has butchered the position, effectively destroying it as a vehicle by which to pursue justice and turning it into a political arm of the current administration, says that open letter we heard about before, signed by more than 100 former prosecutors who worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office under Democratic and Republican presidents. Already, Martin has been the subject of at least 4 disciplinary complaints with the D.C. and Missouri bars, of which one was dismissed and the other 3 appear to be pending. 2 of the complaints came after he moved to dismiss charges against the January 6th rioter, whom he had previously represented, and for whom he was still listed as the counsel of record. The first complaint was dismissed after the D.C. Bar's disciplinary panel concluded that Martin had dismissed the case as a result of Trump's pardons and so did not violate any rules. He escapes by the skin of his teeth there. The third was filed in March by a group of Democratic lawmakers in the U.S. Senate. The fourth, submitted last week by a group of former January 6th prosecutors and members of the conservative-leaning Society for the Rule of Law. It argues that Martin's actions so far, quote, threaten to undermine the integrity of the U.S. Attorney's Office and the legal profession in the District of Columbia, unquote. If Martin has responded to any of the 3 complaints, those responses have not been made public. Trump has nominated Martin to run the office permanently. Senate Democrats, meanwhile, have vowed to drag out Martin's confirmation, and wisely so, because they found there was, in fact, Republican opposition, demanding a hearing and setting up a fight over one of Trump's most controversial nominees. Martin stepped off the elevator into the newsroom of the St. Louis Dispatch. I guess we're shifting time and place in the story here. He was angry at a reporter named Joe Mannies, one of the city's top political journalists. It's J.O. So likely, here we are at a conference table with Mannies and her senior editors. He accused Mannies, and it's Mannies, of being unethical. Wow, another accusation of lack of ethics, and pressed the paper's leadership to spike her stories about him. According to interviews, Mannies said later she believed he was trying to get her fired. He was attacking her, said Pam Maples, who was managing editor at the time. He was implying that she had an axe to grind, that she wanted to get some big story, and that she was not being ethical. And when that didn't get traction, it was more like, this isn't a story. It wasn't that he said anything about a fact being inaccurate or he wanted to retract the story. He wanted the reporting to stop. Mannies had been covering a scandal dubbed Memo Gate that started to unfold in 2007 when Martin was chief of staff to Missouri Governor Matt Blunt. Do we remember this one? Let's think. In that role, Martin was using his government email to undermine Democratic rivals and rally anti-abortion groups. But when reporters requested emails from Blunt's staff, the governor's office denied they existed. Media organizations joined a lawsuit to preserve the messages and recover them from backup tapes. As attorney for the governor, Scott Eckersley later said in a deposition that Martin tried to block the release of government emails and told employees to delete their messages. After Eckersley warned that doing so might violate the law, he was fired. He sued the state for wrongful termination and defamation and settled for $500,000. Martin resigned as chief of staff in 2007 and just a year on the job, and Blunt's office would eventually hand over 22 boxes of internal emails. In a 2008 email to the Associated Press, who I guess he has a long-standing beef with, Martin dismissed Eckersley's lawsuit as a, quote, desperate attempt to revise his story after he was fired, citing Eckersley's own testimony that not all emails are public records. Yeah, but some? The MemoGate incident was telling, and Martin's efforts to have Manny's fired were never reported. His claim was, "We were misrepresenting what the law was and what he was doing," she told ProPublica. I mean, he can get very hyper. He can get very emotional. Men are too emotional for these jobs, I guess. When Martin launched a bid for Congress in 2010, he acted as if MemoGate was ancient history. He's 3 years old, right? He made himself available to Manny's, she recalled, always taking her calls. Years later, he even appeared lighthearted and bantering on a St. Louis public radio podcast Manny's co-hosted. She said Martin could be outlandish and aggressive, but he could also be disarmingly passionate about whatever cause he was pursuing at the moment, often speaking in a frenetic rush. He just wore people down with his enthusiasm, she said. Oh, okay. At least there was some enthusiasm. Right. We always love to hear that. Martin allowed a different St. Louis reporter to shadow him during his 2010 run for Congress. The reporter asked about the St. Louis Election Board, a dysfunctional organization that by all accounts Martin had helped turn around in the mid-2000s. Martin had fired an employee there named Jean Bergfeld, and she later sued for wrongful termination. The board settled the suit. As part of the settlement, Martin agreed not to talk about the case, and the board paid Bergfeld $55,000. Martin and two others issued a letter saying she had been a conscientious and dedicated professional. But talking to the reporter covering his campaign, Martin said Bergfeld enjoyed not having to do anything and wasn't interested in changing. The day after the story was published, Bergfeld sued Martin again, this time for violating the settlement agreement. Martin denied making the comments, but the Riverfront Times released audio that proved he had. Oh, I just deny it, right? What an idiot. Martin agreed to pay Bergfeld another $15,000, but delayed signing the settlement for a few months. The judge then ordered Martin to pay some of her legal costs, citing his obstinacy. Martin lost his 2010 congressional bid. He ran for Missouri Attorney General 2 years later and lost again. After his stint as chair of the Missouri Republican Party, he went to work as Schlafly's right-hand man. Martin grew so attached to Schlafly that a lawyer for the Eagle Forum jokingly called him Ed Martin Schlafly. As the 2016 presidential campaign ramped up, Martin supported Trump, even though Eagle Forum board members, including Corey, supported Senator Ted Cruz. Ew. Corey described Trump at the time as an egomaniacal dictator. Well, that's true. Today, she says she supports him, by the way. Corey and other board members were stunned when Schlafly endorsed Trump, with Martin standing by her side. A few weeks later, a majority of the Eagle Forum's board voted to oust Martin as president. A lawsuit filed by the board cited mismanagement and poor leadership and described his tenure as deplorable. Martin has maintained that he was Schlafly's hand-picked successor and has characterized his removal as a hostile takeover. Every day they are diminishing the reputation and value of Phyllis, he said in a 2017 statement. She died in September of 2016. Corey and the board's lawsuit sought to enforce Martin's removal and demand an accounting of the forum's assets. That's the case that wound up before Barbarous. On top of his efforts to direct Gray's posts on Barbarous's Facebook page, Martin prepared a separate statement, according to previously unreported records from the case. The statement called Barbarous's ruling to remove him as Eagle Forum president judicial activism at its worst. That, quote, shows what happens when the law is undermined by judges who think they can do whatever they want, unquote. All accusations, confession. Once again, Martin emailed the statement, which said it was from Bruce Schlafly, M.D., the name of one of Schlafly's sons, to himself, then sent it to two of her other sons, John and Andy, court filing show. Martin said the statement was a declaration of war and urged the Schlaflys to put something like this out to our biggest list. It's unclear if the message was ever sent. Bruce Schlafly did not respond to requests for comment. In a 2019 sworn deposition, Corey's lawyers asked Martin questions about the posts on Barbaros's Facebook page and the letter he drafted for Bruce Schlafly. Because of the possibility that he could be charged with criminal contempt of court, Martin declined to comment on the advice of his own lawyer, though he acknowledged that lawyers are barred from communicating with judges outside of court or engaging in conduct meant to disrupt proceedings. Andy Schlafly, a lawyer and former Eagle Forum board member who supported Martin in the leadership fight, said, "No court has ever sanctioned Ed for his engagement of First Amendment advocacy," and likened the controversy to liberal attacks on conservative judges. He dismissed concerns about Martin directing Gray to contact the judge, saying she speaks for herself and had every right to voice her outrage. He compared Martin's style then and now to Trump's. Don't let him hear that. He said he did not believe the email Martin drafted for his brother Bruce had ever been sent. But if it had been, it would have been no different from Trump posting on Truth Social, which he considered normal behavior in political battles. What would Trump do in that position? Andy Schlafly said of Martin's current role in Washington. I would say Trump would be doing just what Ed's doing. Elections do have consequences. That makes no sense at all. Gray declined to comment. She's not part of the lawsuit. When Corey's lawyers uncovered the emails, they asked a new judge, David Dugan, just one G in case you're wondering, who had taken over the case after Barbaros was elected to a higher court, by the way, why Martin should not be held in criminal contempt for an underhanded scheme to attack the integrity and authority of the court with the Facebook comments about Barbaros, according to court records. Dugan declined to take up the criminal contempt motion, but he later found Martin and John Schlafly in civil contempt of court for having interfered with Eagle Forum after Barbaros had removed them from the group. John Schlafly appealed the contempt finding and mostly lost. He did not respond to requests for comment. It's unclear if Martin appealed. Corey told ProPublica she also filed an ethics complaint against Martin with the Missouri Office of Chief Disciplinary Counsel, which investigates ethics complaints against lawyers. She said she was told her complaint would have to wait until her lawsuit concluded. The office said it could neither confirm nor deny it had received a complaint. In 2022, when part of Corey's lawsuit went to trial, a jury found Martin liable for defaming her and casting her in a false light, including by sharing a Facebook post suggesting she should be charged with manslaughter for her mother's death. Wow. It awarded $57,000 in damages and also found Martin liable for $25,500 against another Eagle Forum board member. Martin argued that the statute of limitations had expired on the defamation claims and that many of his statements were either true or vague hyperbole not subject to proof. He also claimed he could not be held liable because he didn't write the offending post. He had merely shared something written by someone else. In a post-trial motion, he also leaned into protections that make it harder for public figures to win defamation cases. Under that higher legal standard, it's not enough for a plaintiff to show that a statement was false. Corey also had to prove that Martin knew it was false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth, and he said she didn't prove it. But while he's wrapped himself into First Amendment protections when defending his own speech, he's taken the opposite stance since being named interim U.S. attorney by Trump, threatening legal actions against people when they criticize the administration. For instance, after Representative Robert Garcia called DOGEy leader Elon Musk a dick, and urged Democrats to, quote, bring weapons to a political fight, Martin sent Garcia a letter warning his comments could be seen as threats and demanding an explanation. With the start of Trump's first presidency, Martin and his family moved to the Northern Virginia suburbs near Washington, D.C. Martin has no formal role in the new administration, or had no formal role in that administration, but he turned himself into one of the president's most prolific and unfiltered surrogates. CNN hired him in September of 2017 to be a pro-Trump on-air commentator. Why do they need any of those? I don't know. Only to have to fire him 5 months later after a string of controversial on-air remarks. Well, dug your own grave. He attacked a woman who had accused Alabama U.S. Senate candidate Roy Moore of molesting her as a child. praised Trump for denigrating Senator Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas, and described some of his CNN co-panelists as rabid feminists and black racists. Unbowed, Martin went on to make more than 150 appearances on Russia Today and Sputnik Radio, both Russian state-owned media outlets. First reported by the Washington Post. On RT and Sputnik, Martin railed against the, quote, Russia hoax, criticized the DOJ investigation led by special counsel Robert Mueller, and questioned American support for Ukraine after Russia's invasion by saying the U.S. was, quote, wasting money in Kiev for Zelensky and his corrupt guys. He writes Kiev, not Kyiv. The State Department would later say RT and Sputnik were critical elements in Russia's disinformation and propaganda ecosystem. The Treasury Department sanctioned RT employees in 2024. The DOJ indicted 2 RT employees for conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to fail to register as foreign agents. Martin's flair for fealty set him apart even from fellow Trump supporters. He cheered the Maine Republican Party for considering whether to censure Senator Susan Collins for her vote to convict Trump during the second impeachment trial. He singled out Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska in a radio segment titled America Needs to Go on a Rhino Hunt. He accused Senator John Cornyn of going soft on gun rights after Cornyn endorsed a bipartisan gun safety law after the Uvalde, Texas mass shooting that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. On January 6th, Martin joined the throngs of Trump supporters who marched in protest of the 2020 election outcome. He compared the scene that day to Mardi Gras celebration and later said the prosecution of January 6th defendants was an op orchestrated by former Representative Liz Cheney and law enforcement agencies to damage Trump and Trumpism. During an appearance on Russia Today, one more time, Martin said then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi weaponized Congress's response to the January 6th riots by ramping up security on Capitol Hill, comparing her to the Nazis. Not since the Reichstag fire that was engineered by the Nazis have we seen behavior like what Nancy Pelosi did, he said, until they took over, of course. As an attorney, he represented January 6 defendants, helped raise money for their families, probably kept some, and championed their cause. Last summer, Martin gave an award to a convicted January 6th rioter named Timothy Hale Cusinelli. According to court records, Hale Cusinelli held long-standing white supremacist and Nazi beliefs, wore a Hitler mustache, remember that guy, and allegedly told his co-workers that Hitler should have finished the job. We've seen that guy before. In court, Hale's attorney said his client makes no excuses for his derogatory language, but the government's description of him was simply misleading. After hugging and thanking Hale Cusinelli at the ceremony, Martin told the audience that one of his goals was, quote, to make sure that the world, and especially America, hears more from Tim Hale because he's exemplary. In his 3 months as interim U.S. Attorney for D.C., Martin has used his position to issue a series of threats. He's vowed not to hire anyone affiliated with Georgetown Law unless the school drops any DEI policies. He vowed to Musk that he would pursue any and all legal action against anyone who impedes your work or threatens your people. Wonder if he'd still be interested in doing that if he were at the U.S. Attorney's office. He publicly told former special counsel Jack Smith and Smith's lawyers to, quote, save your receipts. And in another open letter addressed to Musk and Musk's deputy, Martin wrote that, quote, if people are discovered to have broken the law or even acted simply unethically, we will investigate them and we will chase them to the end of the earth and hold them accountable. More often than not, Martin's threats have gone nowhere. A month into the job, he announced Operation Whirlwind, an initiative to hold accountable those who threaten public officials, whether they're DOGEy workers or judges. One of the most abhorrent examples of such threats, he said, were Senator Chuck Schumer's 2020 remarks that conservative Supreme Court justices had released the whirlwind and would pay the price if they weakened abortion rights. Even though Schumer walked back his incendiary comments the next day, Martin said he was investigating Schumer's nearly 5-year-old remarks as a part of Operation Whirlwind. Despite Martin's bravado, the investigation went nowhere. Neither did he or his nomination. No grand jury investigation was opened. No charges were filed. That the probe fizzled out came as little surprise. Legal experts said Schumer's remarks, while ill-advised, fell well short of criminal conduct. In another instance, when one of Martin's top deputies refused to open a criminal investigation into clean energy grants issued by the Biden administration, Martin demanded the deputy's resignation and advanced the investigation himself. When a subpoena arrived at one of the targeted environmental groups, Martin's was the only name on it, according to documents obtained by ProPublica. Kevin Flynn, a former federal prosecutor who served in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office for 35 years, told ProPublica that he did not know of a single case in which the U.S. Attorney was the sole authorizing official on a grand jury subpoena. Flynn said he could think of only two reasons why this could happen. The matter was of such extraordinary sensitivity that the office's leader took exclusive control over it, or no other supervisor or line prosecutor was willing to sign off on the subpoena out of concern that it wasn't legally or ethically appropriate. And when the dispute between the environmental groups and the Justice Department reached a courtroom, federal judge Tanya Chutkan asked a DOJ lawyer defending the administration's actions for any evidence of possible crimes or violations. Evidence, in other words, that could have justified the probe initiated by Martin. The DOJ lawyer said he had none. You can't even tell me what the evidence of malfeasance is, Chutkan said. There are still rules that even the government has to follow, last I checked. Martin's tenure has caused so much consternation that in early April, Senator Adam Schiff of California put a hold on Martin's nomination. Typically, the Senate Judiciary Committee approves U.S. attorney picks by voice vote without a hearing. But in Martin's case, all 10 Democrats on the committee have asked for public hearings to debate the nomination, calling Martin a nominee whose objectionable record merits heightened scrutiny by this committee. Even the process of submitting the requisite paperwork, oh no, not paperwork, for Senate confirmation has tripped him up. According to documents obtained by ProPublica, he has sent the Judiciary Committee 3 supplemental letters that correct omissions about his background. In an earlier submission, Martin did not disclose any of his appearances on Russian state-owned media. But just before the Washington Post reported that Martin had, in fact, made over 150 such appearances, he sent yet another letter correcting his previous statements. "I regret the errors and apologize for any inconvenience," he wrote. And we have made it to the end of this one. Another lengthy compilation of articles about one of the GOP Rogues Gallery members who, I don't know, we just can't seem to shake this guy. And wow, is he ever bad news. Here is the story of another Republican no-good-nick, exposed this time by Rolling Stone's Jacqueline Sweet back on April 1st of this year. Top Trump USAID staffer accused of violent outbursts and racist remarks. 10 people who knew Jeremy Lewin, Lewin, expressed concerns about his new position due to troubling behavior in his youth. Although, depending on what kind of Trump administration person this is, they may still be in their youth, which is interesting all by itself. The lawyer working for Donald Trump and Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGEy to you and me, who now leads the U.S. Agency for International Development, the USAID, has a history of violence and racist remarks. 10 people who knew him allege. How do you like that? Jeremy Lewin recently became Deputy Administrator for Policy and Programs for what's left of USAID, according to an email sent by the State Department, which, might be a lie, but who knows. Lewin previously helped DOGEy dismantle the agency, according to news reports. On Friday, Lewin signed an email officially shuttering USAID and announcing a major reduction in force. I don't know what happened to the guy, where he's parked now, but if we run into him again, we'll want to have his background in our memory banks. In the email, which indicated most of USAID's staff would have their roles eliminated, Lewin wrote that he, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and other top officials, quote, are grateful for your continued service to our great nation. He continued, I would like to offer a special thank you to those of you who, even amidst considerable personal and professional uncertainty, have remained steadfastly committed to serving the agency and its important mission. You exemplify the very best ideals for public service and will not be forgotten or overlooked in this transition process. Yes, you will, but it's a nice letter. And under the circumstances, you could have gotten just FU from these guys. Lewin has prestigious institutions and law firms on his resume. They might even be true. And he's worked with a renowned liberal scholar and clerked for a progressive jurist. But his ascension at USAID, America's Foreign Aid Bureau, has sparked concerns among people who have known him over the years. Rolling Stone spoke with 10 such people who allege that Lewin had a history of violent outbursts and racist remarks. Police records show that he was once accused of threatening a girl with a knife, asking why he shouldn't gut her and cut her right now. No, I don't know. Maybe laws. The girl told police, of course, she feared for her life. Lewin and the Trump administration have not responded to repeated requests for comment. As Deputy Administrator of USAID, Lewin functions as its Chief Operating Officer. Rubio said that 83% of the agency's programs have already been canceled, but sources told the New York Times that some programs involving life-saving medication and national security are likely to be preserved. Lewin, a 28-year-old attorney, in his youth, attended Harvard Law. Oh, PU, please, come on, what? Where he worked as an assistant to prominent legal scholar Lawrence Tribe, although almost everybody who goes to Harvard Law apparently eventually does. He also clerked for a D.C. federal judge and worked brief stints at several high-profile law firms during his 2-year career as an attorney. That's not really very good, though, is it? Why so many? The son of a world-renowned classical pianist and something of a pianist himself, as it turns out, Lewin attended the prestigious Massachusetts Preparatory High School, Buckingham, Brown, and Nichols School. That sounds very, very snooty. I don't know anything about it. The Cambridge private school is one of the top feeder schools for Ivy League universities like Harvard, according to the Harvard Crimson. 6 people who knew him then described a troubled teen who made outlandish claims and expressed racist remarks. I have a vivid memory of him telling me that he believed non-white people were inherently of, quote, lower value than white people. A former acquaintance who describes him as blatantly racist tells Rolling Stone. 5 other former acquaintances agree that Lewin expressed views they considered racist. One of those former classmates remembers Lewin claiming that white people were biologically more intelligent than non-white people. By the way, not really a great role for him then at a foreign aid institution. But of course, since they weren't going to be doing any foreign aid, maybe it's okay. Another person who knew Lewin well as a teenager recalls him being ejected from classes for espousing racist ideals. He was into the Great Replacement theory before it was a thing, they say, referring to the racist far-right conspiracy theory that the elite want to allow in hordes of immigrants to erode the political power of white people. Now, just thinking as I'm reading this, this is difficult for people of my age to immediately grasp, but if he's 28 years old, he could have been in high school at age 18, 10 years ago. And when we get to saying he was into the Great Replacement theory before it was a thing, well, yeah, before it was widely popularized under that name, probably, but you only have to go back 10 years for him to be in high school. So, the Trump era is entering its 10th year in obvious politics. I think really Trump was intent on making it a Trump era as early as, I'd say, at about 2013 or so. But okay, his run for presidency didn't start, and no one took it seriously in 2015 anyway, but it didn't start for another 2 years until 2015. And it wasn't until late 2016 that anybody thought, oh my God, he'll at least be around to compete for this thing. Anyway, again, also this whole in his youth thing, it's not that long ago. It is to a 28-year-old, but not to the rest of us. Okay. Hearing that he is in charge of USAID now gives me the chills, a former acquaintance of Lewin tells Rolling Stone. I thought he had no empathy. He was fashy, misogynistic, and really believed Western civilization was superior. I can see him enjoying taking away humanitarian programs in Africa. It's frightening. It's like letting Hannibal Lecter mind kids or something. Although, there's no indication that he ever ate kids. Come on. Where's your evidence? 7 people who allege that Lewin has a history of violent outbursts. 7 people also allege that. Not the who, but what do they say? Well, now we'll ask them. While he was at Buckingham, Brown and Nichols, which again sounds more like a law firm than a school, Lewin allegedly hit another student with a bowl in the cafeteria and was suspended. 7 people tell Rolling Stone, but I mean, we already said it was 7 people. All right. Unedited. Okay. One witness to the bowl incident says Lewin attacked the student in the school cafeteria after the student said something that upset him and recalled the student's nose bleeding profusely. A different classmate tweeted in 2013, which was 12 years ago, that Lewin had thrown a chair at him. In another tweet, that classmate tagged the boy who was hit with the bowl, inviting him to the club of having Lewin throw things at him and adding the hashtag Angry Lewin. Well, that is interesting. These kids have grown up online, that's for sure. When they were tweeting this stuff in high school, there was a Twitter to tweet on. They hashtagged their upbringing. Violent rages were kind of his thing, another former classmate says. I definitely saw him throwing things at people. Well, now I've thrown things at people too. But hey, it wasn't my entire persona. Another incident took place out of school at a party Lewin threw, not at anybody, but you know what I mean, in July of 2015, during the Trump era, at his parents' home in Newton, according to a police report and 3 witnesses who spoke to Rolling Stone. It was the summer after he graduated high school, when he was 18. Police were called to Lewin's parents' home after he allegedly brandished a kitchen knife at a girl. 3 witnesses say they remember Lewin making threatening comments toward the girl, who was a minor at the time. Maybe she was 17. I don't know. But it's not great. Anyway, they describe it as feeling like a sudden overreaction. You can never really tell when he's going to fly off the handle, says one of those witnesses. Jeremy started yelling at her and blamed her for his missing belongings, says the police report. The redacted named girl, I guess, states during the argument, Jeremy pulled out a knife with an orange handle and said, "Tell me why I shouldn't gut you and cut you right now." This redacted person continued to tell police officers that she felt threatened by Lewin's actions and she was in fear for her life. She then left the party and had her friend drop her off at the Newton police station. Take me there instead of home, huh? Okay. In the report, Lewin told police that the girl threatened him during an argument and threw a notepad at his head. He admitted taking out a knife. Well, that's a bit of an overreaction. But he said he slammed it on the kitchen countertop and asked her to leave in response, which is what people do with knives, of course. Slam them. The knife was confiscated by police, the report says. The police officer who investigated the incident called for a hearing to be scheduled for the charge of assault by means of a dangerous weapon. One of the party witnesses tells Rolling Stone the hearing was ultimately canceled for unknown reasons. Representatives from the Newton Police Department and Newton District Court both said they could not provide further information on the case. At least 8 people tell Rolling Stone that Lewin regularly presented fanciful and dubious claims. He told people in high school that he was in talks to design body armor for the U.S. government with a multi-million-dollar contract, they say. Why not? Sure. An archived version of Lewin's biography at his most recent law firm, Munger, Tolles, and Olson, LLP, claimed that Lewin confidentially advised senior global policymakers, including former President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Of course he did. After high school, Lewin pursued an educational and career trajectory that spanned the ideological spectrum, despite his own personal politics. At Dartmouth University, he was a member of the College Republican Club and contributed a piece to the conservative Dartmouth Review, but while at Harvard Law, he penned liberal-leaning op-eds with prominent liberal congressional scholar Lawrence Tribe. One of those editorials, published in The Guardian, warned that the conservative-dominated Supreme Court has climate protection in its sights. Another piece the two wrote for the New York Times argued that the U.S. should liquidate Russia's Federal Reserves and give it to Ukraine in response to Russia's invasion. While at Harvard Law, Lewin wrote a 2021 opinion piece titled The Progressive Case for Libel Reform in the Wall Street Journal, arguing that progressives should support overturning New York Times versus Sullivan, the landmark press protection 1964 decision. Lewin argued that rather than harming liberal values of free expression, overturning Sullivan would increase the media's incentive to be honest. Progressives should eagerly embrace such movement toward a more truthful society, he wrote. Lewin worked as Tribe's assistant, a position also famously held by former President Barack Obama, as well as Kenneth Chesebro, an attorney indicted as part of Trump's legal plot, a really illegal plot, to overturn the 2020 election. Tribe has not responded to requests for comment. After law school, Lewin clerked for Judge Judith Rogers, the first black woman appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. Is that right? And who is known for her progressive stances. Some of those who knew Lewin say they aren't surprised that Lewin achieved such early success. At least 6 of the people Rolling Stone spoke with described him as intelligent and driven, as he was difficult to get along with, as intelligent and driven as he was. Okay. A fellow Dartmouth College Republican member, Michaela Nesbach, tells Rolling Stone she thinks Lewin has a chance to improve the U.S. foreign aid apparatus and make it work for the United States interests. Well, not anymore because it's gone. I was in a few classes with Jeremy. Jeremy spoke in class. Never mind. And always found him to have nuanced and educated views, she says. He seemed to be a very smart guy, and I'm excited to see what he makes of his career. Lewin is now playing a leadership role at USAID because there's no one left, which has already been gutted to the bone. His appointment to the deputy administrator position was viewed by some pundits to be a legal maneuver after a federal judge found that Musk and DOGEy's efforts to shutter the agency were likely unconstitutional. That federal judge, however, indicated that appointing Lewin to USAID didn't exempt Lewin from any decisions about the illegality of DOGEy's actions at USAID. The judge specifically included Lewin in his order prohibiting DOGEy from continuing to shut down the agency. It is unclear if Lewin's Friday email violated that order, though an appeals court ruling the same day allowed the administration to keep dismantling the agency. Prior to his hearing at hiring as USAID's deputy administrator, Lewin was reportedly earning a salary of $167,000 as the DOGEy lead at the agency, seeking daily approvals from Rubio for billions of dollars in cuts, according to Bloomberg. The Trump administration plans to fold the scraps of USAID into a new agency within the State Department to be named the U.S. Agency for International Humanitarian Assistance, according to the New York Times. A source close to the agency tells Rolling Stone that supervisors recently began onboarding the few remaining USAID staffers onto State Department systems. So that's it. We got down to the end of it on that one. Those left at the agency are wondering, there's 2 lines left. What's coming next? We're petrified, the staffer tells Rolling Stone. Honestly, we are just broken, but that's really more about the dismantling of USAID than about this famous son of a pianist, Jeremy Lewin. All right, keep the name in mind. Keep an eye out for him. And if you see him, duck. Here's another Rogues Gallery member to keep an eye on. From, of course, the GOP. Semaphore reports this one. Kadia Goba is the reporter. Black White House aide. That's a little confusing. This White House. Black White House aide returns after suspension for past political activity on the job. You remember when we found out that the Hatch Act was not effective as against the first Trump administration. And here's one illustration of it. Although one person had to go on suspension for a Hatch Act violation, and that person was black. But it's all over now. And here's the story. The Scoop, you know how they report things over at Semaphore. Everything is divided into sections. The Scoop is about Lynne Patton. Do you remember? The highest ranking black official in Donald Trump's White House. You remember last time around, wasn't she at at HUD. I think that was all black people in the Trump administration are at HUD, of course. But highest ranking black official in Donald Trump's White House is returning to work this week. What week was it? May 5th also. It was alongside the other entry in the Rogues Gallery. Lynne Patton has returned to work this week after fully serving out a suspension from federal employment related to a past Hatch Act violation. After she was appointed as Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Minority Outreach in late January, this time around. I think she was in trouble last time, too. Patton stepped aside for 2 months to comply with, a 2021 sanction by the U.S. Office of Special Counsel. Semaphore has learned she's expected to return this week in the same dual roles. So she violated that law way back when, in the first administration. They found her, guilty of the violation in 2021, I guess when it was too late to impose any sort of sanction on her anyway. And then when she came back in the second administration, they said, you got a suspension coming. You have to serve out your red card. All right. Well, that's of interest. The special counsel's office settled with Patton after alleging that she improperly used her Department of Housing and Urban Development position during Trump's first term for political purposes. Patton acknowledged violations of the Hatch Act, which is meant to bar federal employees from partisan political activity on the job. But of course, I assume we all assumed that it was in danger in the first Trump term. Now we know it's just a dead letter because everyone working for the Trump administration is intentionally meant to engage in partisan political activity on the job. That's how you keep your job in this administration. The White House did not respond to multiple requests for comment. No more, KNOW, more. Would you like to know more? You have to. During the president's first term, OSC, Office of Special Counsel, singled out more than a dozen members of his administration as violating the Hatch Act. Kellyanne Conway was reprimanded twice for using her position to promote Ivanka Trump's clothing line. Both for Ivanka Trump. Stephanie Grisham, Nikki Haley, and Dan Scavino were reprimanded for using their government's social media accounts for political activity. The OSC also found that then Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue unlawfully promoted Trump's re-election in 2020 while delivering an official speech in North Carolina and ordered him to repay costs associated with the trip. None of those offenses rose to the level of Patton's violation, according to the watchdog group that filed multiple complaints against her between 2018 and 2019. I think Ms. Patton served the harsh penalty for violations in part because what OSC found with respect to her violations is that she misled citizens about what they were being asked to be a part of. Donald Sherman, executive director of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, told Semaphore. The Office of Special Counsel found that Patton, while serving as a HUD regional administrator, filmed New York City Housing Authority residents and later used the footage in a video shown at the Republican National Convention. She was fined $1,000 and barred from federal service for 48 months as part of the settlement. Oh, but I guess time served by being out of power for 4 years. Tim Murtaugh, a spokesman for the Trump campaign, defended the handling of the video at the time. Really? All interview subjects were fully aware of the purpose of their interviews, he told the New York Times in August. Lynne Patton was acting in her own personal capacity. Sure. Not everyone thought the penalty matched the crime. The Project on Government Oversight criticized the special counsel's office for singling out Patton, the only black woman among the 17 Trump administration officials that it found to have violated the Hatch Act during Trump's first term. Also notable here, just a couple of bonuses at the end, Trump's administration recently proposed weakening the Hatch Act. Why not? In order to make it easier for federal officials to support the sitting president, the New York Times has reported. And point number 2 here, during the Biden administration, the Office of Special Counsel sanctioned a federal prosecutor for what it described as, quote, one of the most egregious Hatch Act violations that the OSC has investigated. I'm not certain what it was, but there's a link And I guess that was just included. Just so you know that Biden was worse, I think. Maybe. OSC report finds flagrant willful Hatch Act violations by Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins. I think I missed that story. And it's dated May of 2023, so 2 years ago. I don't really, know if we want to dig fully into this, but maybe you missed this one. All right. After informing Ms. Rollins of the report's public release, she announced her intent to resign. Oh my gosh, people still do that? Well, they did back then. The U.S. Office of Special Counsel today sent a report to President Biden detailing how Rachel Rollins, U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, did that thing and willfully violated the Hatch Act on multiple occasions, thereby exhibiting an extraordinary abuse of her power as U.S. Attorney. OSC determined that the violations warrant disciplinary action. Rollins was provided with a copy of the report. This is the boring stuff. Give me the good thing. The first violation arose in July of 2022 when, in disregard of legal advice from her own agency and in violation of the Hatch Act, she attended a political party fundraiser in her official capacity. Well, you shouldn't. That's true. Second violation occurred throughout August and September of 2022 when she repeatedly attempted to sabotage the campaign of a political candidate. Cool. By leaking non-public U.S. Department of Justice information to the media to plant the story that the candidate she opposed was facing a DOGEy investigation. That's not great. In its report to the president, OSC characterized this violation as one of the most egregious Hatch Act violations the OSC has investigated. Otherwise known as any day ending in a Y in the Trump administration. But it's not good. All right, I didn't really mean to focus on that one because that's a long time ago. And after all, this is the GOP Rogues Gallery, and she's not a GOP. But, okay, now you know that there was such a thing. Semaphore has raised your awareness of it, and and I killed your interest in it. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that those two are on the record. And as a bonus, now you know the name of Rachel Rollins as well. And finally, here is a piece that poses something of a challenge, I think. The New York Times editorial board writing an opinion piece entitled A Comprehensive Accounting of Trump's Culture of Corruption. This is a June 7th piece, and so fairly recent. And I didn't think anybody would be foolish enough to try to claim to have a comprehensive accounting of Trump's culture of corruption, but leave it to the New York Times editorial board. So let's see how comprehensive we think it is. And it runs like this. And by the way, they note here at the top, the editorial board is a group of opinion journalists whose views are informed by, well, it says expertise, research, debate, and certain long-standing values. That's catch-all. It is separate from the newsroom, and I don't know if that matters to you or not. But at the gala dinner President Trump held last month for those who bought the most Trump cryptocurrency, the champion spender was the entrepreneur Justin Sun, who had put down more than $40 million on Trump coins. Mr. Sun had a good reason to hope that this investment would pay off. He previously invested $75 million in a different Trump crypto venture. And shortly after the Trump administration took office in January, the Securities and Exchange Commission paused its lawsuit against him on charges of cryptocurrency fraud. The message seemed obvious enough. People who make Mr. Trump richer regularly receive favorable treatment from the government he runs. The cryptocurrency industry is perhaps the starkest example of the culture of corruption in his second term. He and his relatives directly benefit from the sale of their cryptocurrency by receiving a cut of the investment. Even if the price of the coins later falls and investors lose money, the Trumps can continue to benefit by receiving a commission on future sales. Forbes magazine estimates that he made about $1 billion in cryptocurrency in the past 9 months, about 1/6 of his net worth. Only a few years ago, Mr. Trump was deeply skeptical of cryptocurrency, calling it, quote, potentially a disaster waiting to happen, and comparing it to the drug trade and other illegal activity, with which it's closely tied, of course, because there's really no other use case for the stuff. But anyway, that's a different story. Since he and his family have become major players in the market, however, his concerns have evidently disappeared. He shut down a Justice Department team that investigated illegal uses of cryptocurrency. He pardoned crypto executives who pleaded guilty to crimes, and his administration dropped federal investigations of crypto companies. He nullified an IRS rule that went after crypto users who didn't pay their taxes. Seems like a good thing to do, right? Sure. The self-enrichment of the second Trump administration is different from old-fashioned corruption. And by the way, I would say, if I had to guess, I think that it's Trump's bet that because it's different from old-fashioned corruption, anybody who ever prosecutes him, if that ever should happen, will have a very difficult time proving the case, and they'll just simply claim that none of the laws then in place governed the activity in question anyway. All right. So as we said, the self-enrichment of the second Trump administration is different from old-fashioned corruption. There is no evidence, they say, that Mr. Trump has received direct bribes, nor is it clear that he has agreed to specific policy changes in exchange for cash. Nonetheless, he is presiding over a culture of corruption. He and his family have created several ways for people to enrich them, and government policy then changes in ways that benefit those who have helped the Trumps profit. Often, Mr. Trump does not even try to hide the situation. As the historian Matthew Dallek recently put it, Trump is the most brazenly corrupt national politician in modern times, and his openness about it is sui generis. He is proud of his avarice, wearing it as a sign of success and savvy. This culture is part of Mr. Trump's larger efforts to weaken American democracy and turn the federal government into an extension of himself, right? The difference between personality and everything else that he's administering, right? Anyway, he has pushed the interests of the American people to the side in favor of his personal interests. His actions reduce an already shaky public faith in government. By using the power of the people for personal gain, he degrades that power for any other purpose. He stains the reputation of the United States, which has long stood out as a place where confidence in the rule of law fosters confidence in the economy and financial markets. This country was not previously known as an executive kleptocracy. During Mr. Trump's first term, he frequently used his powers to reward himself. He held government events at his hotels, and his family business continued to make deals involving foreign governments in an apparent violation of the constitutional prohibition of enrichment from foreign leaders. Emoluments, right? But then again, maybe not. Anyway, but those erasures of ethical norms now look like a dress rehearsal for the ultimate production of the second term. Given the stakes, we believe that it is important to step back and document the range of self-dealing since he took office 4 months ago. First up, while administration officials engage in complex negotiations in the Middle East, Mr. Trump and his family are making billions of dollars worth of deals with players in the region. The Trump Organization has 6 real estate projects planned in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. The company struck a deal with the Qatari government to build a golf club and beachside villas that will bring in millions of dollars in fees. Mr. Trump announced recently that Qatar was donating a Boeing 747-8 worth about $200 million. That's actually half what they said it was worth, to serve as a more luxurious Air Force One, which he has said could go to his presidential library after he leaves office. Really? Yeah, we've heard him say it, but okay. For all this, he has made clear that tiny Qatar can expect a cozy relationship. We are going to protect this country, Mr. Trump said in Doha. It's a very special place with a very special royal family. Holy cow. Next up, during his first term, those currying favor with Mr. Trump bought drinks and dinner or spent the night at his Washington hotel. Now they can spend $500,000 to join the private club that Donald Trump Jr. is opening in Georgetown. Forget Mar-a-Lago. This one's $500,000 right here in D.C. It's called Executive Branch, as if it wasn't, enough that everybody could see that it was open, brazen corruption. They actually named it so that you would think it was. The club's founding members include Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, twin brothers whose cryptocurrency company was being sued by the SEC until Mr. Trump's administration put a hold on the lawsuit. How nice. As his administration is negotiating with Vietnam in this third bullet point here to reduce the tariffs he imposed on the country's goods, the government there is making way for a $1.5 billion golf complex outside Hanoi, as well as a Trump skyscraper in Ho Chi Minh City. He's got no, scruples about where he's building and the symbolism of it all, having dodged the draft himself, but whatever. I don't even hold that necessarily against him, but this whole thing is insane. And I'm just thinking about the fact that this is happening in Vietnam, where just the other day, was it Senator Kennedy was asking those questions of Howard Lutnick and asking, well, what if Vietnam said, you know what, you're right, we'll drop all our tariffs and all our trade barriers if you'll do the same. And Lutnick said, we'd never do that. And we couldn't really figure out, well, what does he really want in order to make a trade deal with Vietnam? And I guess part of the answer probably is, well, how about a $1.5 billion golf complex outside Hanoi, as well as a Trump skyscraper in Ho Chi Minh City? Okay. Well, they continue here. Vietnamese officials said in a letter that the real estate project needed to be fast-tracked because it was, quote, receiving special attention from the Trump administration and President Donald Trump personally. They actually just said outright, we feel pressure here. Next up, Serbian officials cleared the way for a Trump International Hotel in Belgrade by using a forged document. I'm going to have to read about that one, to permit the demolition of a cultural site at the location. They love forging. They are really into that one. Okay. Serbian opposition leaders say the forgery demonstrates how eager the country's government has been to do a deal benefiting Mr. Trump. More forgery. Mr. Trump has held meetings, this next bullet point says, including one in the Oval Office, to force a merger between the PGA Tour, and who really cares, and the Saudi-backed Live Golf Circuit, which frequently holds tournaments on Trump courses. In April, Live Golf paid the Trump family to host a tournament at the Trump National Doral in Florida. A merger could lead to more such events. Next, the right-wing activist Elizabeth Fago attended a $1 million per person fundraising dinner for MAGA Incorporated, Mr. Trump's super PAC, in April. Less than 3 weeks later, the Times reported he granted a full pardon to Ms. Fago's son, Paul Walchak, who pleaded guilty to tax crimes in 2024. The pardon is one of many issued by Mr. Trump to people who provided him with political or financial support or were associated with others who did. Next, after personally suing media companies that the government regulates, including CBS, Paramount, and ABC Disney, Mr. Trump has won millions of dollars in settlements. Paramount has reportedly offered $15 million to settle a baseless lawsuit Mr. Trump filed against CBS, fearing that the Trump administration would otherwise block its planned merger with Skydance Media. Mr. Trump is demanding $25 million. Next, Amazon has agreed to pay $40 million for the rights to a documentary about Melania Trump, about whom there's no story. So what are you doing? We've never heard that story, but I guess that's why it's so important and interesting. That's tens of millions more than such projects usually cost, Hollywood executives have said. Mrs. Trump's cut is more than 70%. Defense contracts for web services would be reason enough for Amazon to curry favor with Mr. Trump. And lastly, among these bullet points here, Mr. Trump's inaugural committee raised $239 million, mostly from large corporations and business leaders. The committee spent far less than that on the inauguration and faces few legal restrictions on what to do with the rest of the money. It is typical for presidents not to spend all of their inaugural funds, but previous presidents raised far less than Mr. Trump. The largest donor, A chicken processor called Pilgrim's Pride already seems to be benefiting from favorable government policies, the Wall Street Journal has reported. The motivation for people to give so much money to the President of the United States is plain. Some want him to bestow favors on them. Others are trying to avoid being punished by his administration's vindictive approach to governance. All of them want to shift government policy to benefit them, often at the expense of the American people. In the case of his foreign benefactors, they may not use campaign contributions to do so because federal law, for what it's worth, prohibits foreigners from donating to election campaigns. There are no such restrictions, though, on Georgetown Club memberships or crypto funds. The investors in the Trump's crypto company include the United Arab Emirates, which is investing $2 billion, and a small technology company with ties to China that is buying as much as $300 million worth of Trump's meme coins. What can be done about all this? Congressional Republicans probably have the greatest ability to influence his behavior, and they have largely been quiescent, or I've switched the order of the words here, but have been largely quiescent. It is quite a contrast with the past when Republicans appropriately raised concerns about dubious Democratic behavior, such as, let's say Hunter Biden's attempts to cash in on his family name and Bill Clinton's efforts to reward top Democratic donors with nights in the Lincoln bedroom or even a pardon. The Trump's behavior is far more egregious and voluminous. Legal remedies also appear limited. Mr. Trump's Justice Department, and that's the problem, it is Mr. Trump's Justice Department, and other agencies have made clear that they will not investigate his allies, let alone him and his family. Even long-term efforts to investigate corruption will be hobbled. Corruption in general, I would say, right? The Supreme Court last year made it virtually impossible to hold a president criminally liable for actions even distantly related to his official duties, which may well include Mr. Trump's self-enrichment. As for the people offering the tributes to Mr. Trump, he has made clear that he is willing to use his pardon power to protect his allies, regardless of the criminality of their behavior. Sadly, that leaves voters as the remaining remedy. The best hope of holding Mr. Trump accountable for his culture of corruption involves calling attention to it and making his allies pay a political price for enabling it. Congressional Republicans clearly feel sheepish about aspects of it. A few of them, including Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the majority leader, and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, expressed concerns about the Qatari airplane. So did Ben Shapiro, the conservative podcaster. They all recognize that corruption is a political vulnerability. Sort of, I would say. Some congressional Democrats have tried to focus attention on the situation. Donald Trump wants to numb this country into believing that this is just how government works. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, said in a recent floor speech that he's owed this, that every president is owed this, that government has always been corrupt and he's just doing it out in the open. But Democrats should do even more to highlight the ways that Mr. Trump is using powers that rightfully belong to the American people, the powers of the federal government, to benefit himself. That's really what's at the heart of it. If Americans shrug this off as just Trump being Trump, his self-dealing will become accepted behavior. It will encourage other politicians to sell their offices. The damage will undermine our government, our society, and even our economy. Historically, when corruption becomes the norm in a country, economic growth suffers and living standards stagnate. Under Mr. Trump, the United States is sliding down that slope. Well, I don't know if I would call it a comprehensive accounting, but it does help fill out the larger picture. Certainly, all the latest and greatest hits were listed. And they do a great job explaining just how much damage can be done by this kind of pervasive culture of corruption. Everybody suffers. Everybody loses out. Everybody loses when he cashes in on power that's supposed to belong to you, for one thing. And everybody loses when there's just no logical sense or any expectations that hard work will be rewarded by the marketplace anymore, when everybody knows that all the benefits are going to go to the cheaters and the bribe payers. How much are you going to invest in doing your business legitimately if you know you'll never get ahead versus the cheaters? That's the real problem.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, this is the end of the last pre-recorded Kagro in the Morning show for this stretch. We'll be back live tomorrow, and Greg with me to take stock of what has happened to this country while I was away. In the meantime, do stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam next, right here on Netroots Radio.